Back again. Another episode of A Muslim and the Atheist Breaks Bread. What you saying, Pop?
I'm good, man.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Diving into a bit more of, I should say, India. Such a vast place. Like, when we talk about people, I don't even know how many people are in India, so I'd be interested to see.
Billions in it.
Billions. I mean, there's 9 billion people on the whole entire planet. So imagine if that continent's got more than 2 or 3
Well, if you
billion.
gave 2 to India, 2 to China, and then the rest across the rest of the world, I would say a significant portion that would be Africa as well. So
how much people does Africa have?
Africa you can put most of the countries in the world into Africa.
But that doesn't mean that it's filled with people. And
Yeah,
there's probably
but
a lot of
land mass
barren
wise.
land mass wise. But how many people does it have?
I don't know.
That would be
I
interesting to
haven't
find
got a
out.
figure.
We'll figure that out. Right, so
Series.
we're going to do a video on Delhi. I've been to Delhi, Old Delhi, New Delhi. Again, where did I go? Jampat. Mixed place again, like I said. It's one of the places where you can really see the rich and the poor. Yeah, the disparity in rich and poor. So I'll be interested to see. I mean, I went a long time ago. I'm actually going back in 2025 January to going to Varanasi and a few other places with a family member. But I'm really interested to see what has progressed since I went all those years ago. So yeah, we're going to watch a video. Delhi, India's megacity. Now, first of all, a megacity is any city that's got over 10 million people. I think that's correct. So Delhi's got 1 billion people. Think about that, 1 billion. Like, Birmingham to me is too busy. That's just 63 million people. Or is that England? No, England's got 63 million people, sorry. England. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see. 63 million people, and then they got 1 billion people in one city. That's some Game of Thrones, King's Landing shit, that is. Yeah, okay, let's go.
This is the most populous city and the capital of a country that will soon have more people than anywhere else on Earth. Home to more than 31 million residents, it's a chaotic place with a complicated history. It has major problems in housing, inequality, and transportation. But if it can solve them, its residents will experience an enormous increase in prosperity. As India's seat of power, what happens here impacts 1 billion people and reverberates around the world. This is Delhi.
So, what was it saying? So, India's got 1 billion
31
people.
million. Delhi's got 31 million.
Delhi's got
people.
31. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Still, though, like I said, that's
Half the country of Britain.
yeah,
The population.
it's crazy, man.
Delhi, a fulcrum of the 21st century. Nestled along a protective ridge that sends Himalayan snowmelt either west to the tributaries of the Indus River or east to the Ganges, Delhi is the gateway to one of the most expansive, fertile agricultural plains on the planet, and a collection point for goods on their way to an extensive coastline for export. This land has been the capital of empire after empire for thousands of years. But the defining moment in its modern history occurred 75 years ago when India declared its independence from the British Empire at Delhi's Red Fort.
At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
This resulted in the partition of the Indian territory along religious lines into India and West and East Pakistan, which eventually became independent Bangladesh. This had massive consequences.
The very morning after independence celebrations, Hindus in Pakistan and Muslims in India began to flee their homes. Muslims headed for Pakistan, while Hindus set off for India. Enormous convoys of people moving in opposite directions. The greatest mass migration in history. 10 million people were displaced. Many were attacked by robbers and armed militants along the way. 1 million people lost their lives.
This flood of new arrivals overwhelmed the city as illegal housing settlements sprouted and grew all over. This building wasn't done to code and lacked basic plumbing and sewers. It's a crisis that Delhi is still struggling to solve. Today, the percentage of its residents living in these so-called unauthorized areas is as high as 40%. That's a staggering 12 million people. But to get a more complete picture of what Delhi is today, we must go back to the events after Indian independence. In 1947, Indian per capita income had not increased since 1757. That's 190 years of British imperialists taking ownership of and exporting away vast quantities of India's bountiful natural resources. Revolutionary Mahatma Gandhi and his hand-picked political heir, Jawaharlal Nehru, knew the Indian people needed a far different system than what the British Empire had imposed. What Nehru wanted was an idyllic total society in which injustice and inequality would be defeated by the perfect nation system. This dream was cemented during a short 4-day visit to Moscow, where Nehru and his father were wined and dined by the Communist Party's elite, celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. With tightly managed visits to factories and theaters, this was an obvious attempt to impart a rosy picture of Soviet-style socialism onto visiting dignitaries. And it worked. Nehru was awed by the USSR's achievements in industry, art, and bureaucracy. Unfortunately for India, Nehru overlooked the dangers of the Soviet system, where a small group of men controls all of its institutions and resources and used them to dominate the miserable masses. When Nehru became India's first prime minister, he created his own version of a centrally planned economy, convinced that only an all-powerful state could bring about development rapid enough to achieve his vision.
Nehru was a rational thinker, and he wanted to apply science and technologies to solve the great mass poverty that prevailed at the time of independence.
While Nehru's leadership brought about democracy and some industrialization, as the Delhi-based author Rana Dasgupta explains, the complexity of actual economic processes proved too great, and by the end of his time in power in the mid-1960s, many sectors of the economy had been choked by regulatory restrictions and lack of capital.
The government of India went into business in a big way, and they decided to control whatever was there in the private sector also, as firmly and fiercely as they could.
The British Raj was gone. Now people were subjected to the permit Raj, because everything needed a government permit. India became a byword for red tape and bureaucracy.
Real estate and land development in the city of Delhi was one of the most tightly controlled sectors. The Delhi Development Authority, or DDA, was created in 1957 and granted the exclusive responsibility of land development within the borders of the city. The DDA prevented individuals from owning more than a handful of acres and forced people to sell the agency their property at below market prices. This backfired, disincentivizing private sector construction just when Delhi needed it most to keep pace with its explosive population growth. Since 1950, Delhi's metro population has increased 21-fold, yet the DDA remains in control of its real estate sector. Every project has to meander through its inefficient bureaucracy. When it does approve new private development, it usually uses a lottery system, with residents waiting years, sometimes decades, to see if they've won the right to build. This leads to all sorts of efforts to game the DDA system, making it even more inefficient and corrupt.
Indian.
I mean, what do you think of what do you think of communism? So obviously this is just like a hyper. They've obviously seen communism and thought, right, we're gonna try and emulate aspects of that and make it our own, and which doesn't really work. Like, you've got to have a lottery. I guess it kind of, in their head, they thought that makes it fair, and but but it clearly doesn't make it fair. Or
I think you just do your best then when you're making a government and you're planning for 100-year plan and stuff. You know you're not going to be there to facilitate it. And technology and everything else comes into it. Now, these people were starting from a point of being totally plundered.
Yes.
So the economic problem they were experiencing, plus Britain left, but they still managed everything. So the bureaucracy was caused by, again, the clash of cultures, I would imagine. And inexperience on the Indian administrators.
Well, it sounds like it. The man was giving out lottery tickets to build housing.
Like lottery.
In
other words, backhand job.
Since it was impossible to work with the system,
be a brown envelope.
To work around it.
Every license, every permit was procured by corrupt means.
There you go.
Well, bribe is the simpler word, I suppose. The Indian people were being given shoddy goods and services at very high prices. Enterprise was stifled and growth was crippled.
The economic environment was simply not conducive to efficiency or profitability.
For a study in contrast, we need only look just beyond Delhi's official city limits to the gleaming skyline and well-maintained infrastructure of Delhi's tech hub, Gurgaon, or Gurugram as it's now officially known. Two strategic moves made Gurgaon what it is today. First, after it became clear that the DDA made private development impossible in the city of Delhi, the real estate company DLF bought up farmland on the outskirts in the 1970s and 80s. Then it decisively developed it as it saw Western corporations beginning to embrace the practice of business operations outsourcing. Today, hundreds of Fortune 500 companies have offices in Gurgaon to take advantage of Delhi's large English-speaking workforce, who gladly perform services at salaries fractions of what workers in the US or Europe earn. As a master-planned, sterile city dominated by corporations, the amount of privatization sometimes goes too far. The Gurgaon police force is outnumbered by private security officers 10-1. Still, it's hard to argue with the results from an infrastructure perspective, as noted by a local economist.
Most people did not even know Gurgaon existed 30 years ago. It was completely a farmland on the outskirts of Delhi. Inside a compound of a colony, you will find great services, world-class standards. Right outside that gate, public services don't exist. So water connections are very poor, sewerage lines are not done very well. It's, in a sense, story of India, frankly, where the private initiative has been very successful, has created world-class standards and aspirations among the people, right? While the public sector has not been able to keep up with that.
For every new arrival to the Delhi megacity that finds tech work in Gurgaon, several others are unemployed or struggling to make ends meet in low-wage jobs like rickshaw drivers and housekeepers. Unfortunately, many of them end up living in makeshift houses in the middle of the metropolis.
Some of my neighbors have been living here for 20 years. There's no electricity, no running water, and no toilets. My husband can't find work anywhere. We have no future.
India is often portrayed in the West as the world's largest democracy, but things are more complicated in the capital. Decision-making in Delhi operates within a complex political system. There's an elected assembly, their leader the city's chief minister, a lieutenant governor appointed by the President of India who oversees agencies like the powerful DDA, and 3 municipal corporations who each elect a mayor. Last year, things got even more muddled when the national government of India passed a law requiring the local Delhi government to secure the lieutenant governor's sign-off before any executive action goes into effect. There seems to be a strong aversion to directly electing public leaders in India. Perhaps this is due to the relative newness of democracy itself in the country. In fact, for most of the time since independence, India has resembled a hereditary dynasty, with either Nehru, his daughter, or his grandson holding the premiership for 38 of the 44 years between 1947 and 1991. the year when decades of bad policy pushed India's economy to the brink of total collapse.
The collapse of the Soviet Union reverberated round the world. For India, it was the end of a role model.
This was a telling proof that a command type of economy was not as secure as we had thought.
The government was left holding too many worthless Soviet rubles, and severe agricultural shortages were setting in.
We were borrowing heavily. We had to mortgage our gold deposits. Our growth rate had come to virtually zero.
The government of India was broke. In 1991, the new Prime Minister appointed economist Singh as finance minister.
The argument was quite simple. We were in the midst of an unprecedented crisis. It was time to think big.
Despite resistance within his own party, the Prime Minister approved Singh's plans. To secure a massive loan from its former British colonizers, India transferred 40 tons of gold bars to the Bank of England and opened its economy through capitalist reforms.
We introduced more competition to release the innovative spirits which were always there in India. The economy turned around much sooner and much more deeply than I had anticipated.
Indeed, the results speak for themselves. Per capita GDP has climbed steadily and today stands 627% higher than it was in 1991. But it's still less than its neighbor Bangladesh and African nations Nigeria and Congo. 30 years is just not a very long time to develop considering its poor starting position, which means its economy can still be quite dysfunctional, as the Delhi-based author Rana Dasgupta described in a 2018 talk.
A lot of the massive new projects of India, the new highways, the new airports, are actually completely authoritarian in the way that they are done. Farmers are kicked off land using state apparatus, police, bureaucracy, etc. And business people come in who are friends of politicians and partners and build these things very fast. Though India models itself on the US to a very great extent, the city I describe is much more close to Moscow than to New York or Washington. A city in which a small number of extremely well-networked people have huge control over access to opportunities, capital, etc.
All of the factors I've discussed so far came together in the construction of a mega project of enormous importance, the Delhi Metro. First conceptualized in 1969, the project languished for decades as indecisive state agencies and officials studied and debated and planned. Meanwhile, Delhi's population boomed, and with no other way to get around, more and more gasoline-powered vehicles took to the streets. Just like with housing, the government was constantly playing catch-up, resulting in a haphazard road network and inconsistently built infrastructure. Today, there are more vehicles on the streets of Delhi than anywhere else on Earth, contributing to its horrific air quality. Its residents spend 14 million combined hours every day stuck in traffic and lose a staggering 9.7 years of average life expectancy breathing toxic air.
Jeez.
After enough public outrage, metro construction finally broke ground.
What is that? It's like Gambia. Is it? Just traffic everywhere.
Yeah, that's how it was. I hope it changes by the time I get there next with the new roads. That's it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
With the 1991 economic reforms and more competent leadership pushing the project into existence, the first line opened in 2002. It has grown rapidly in the 2 decades since. Now, 10 lines and 254 stations make up a system that covers more than 200 miles and carries over 4 million passengers a day, making it the 6th most ridden metro network in the world. It is a vital megaproject in the course of human history, not just because it is the first rail-based system to get carbon credits for reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 630,000 tons every year. It's really significant because it's a huge confidence boost for the people of Delhi, confirmation that Indians can take on their biggest problems and solve them Improvements in the capital and across the country are happening more quickly now. The Delhi government has brought water to those that lack it, and according to its calculations, every unauthorized colony should have at least one communal tap by the end of this year. In 2014, the Modi government launched the Clean India mission. It has subsidized the installation of 90 million toilets, and today, more than 70% of Indians have access to one. Now turns to the big job of proper management and treatment of all the waste these newly built bathrooms collect. On housing, some fresh approaches are finally empowering residents of Delhi's unauthorized colonies to develop neighborhoods themselves. But there's a long way to go, and it seems obvious from the outside that the DDA approach needs a complete overhaul. For Delhi to really thrive, it also needs a better trained and funded police force. And to clean up its air, bans on agricultural crop burning in neighboring states must be enforced. Many farmers just ignore this law, sending smoke that blankets the capital for weeks every fall. And to cut emissions, Delhi's many vehicles, especially its auto rickshaws and motorcycles, must go electric. 70% of India's electricity is still generated by coal, but it now costs less to build a solar farm in India than anywhere else in the world. Panels should soon cover sun-soaked Rajasthan to the southwest, with wind turbines rising all along the blustery Gujarat coast. Few societies in history have faced as many simultaneous challenges and opportunities as India. It is projected that 70% of India's infrastructure for the year 2030 hasn't been built yet, which makes the next 5 to 10 years critical. If leaders in Delhi can pass and enforce laws that develop the country efficiently, the increase in quality of life will be one of the most remarkable stories of the first half of the 21st century, and will position India to become a global power with few rivals. If you enjoyed this video, help me make more of them by becoming a supporting member at tdc.video. Membership unlocks my research sources, a linked document curating the content that most helped me, so you can learn a lot more about Delhi too without sifting through a bunch of other stuff that isn't on the level. Until next time, I'm Bryce Plank.
Like
Progress
everywhere else
needs,
in the world.
kind of like everywhere else in the world. I wouldn't quite put it like that.
Well, volume's obviously the thing there, in it, but the situation, corruption, lack of coordination, all kind of problems. So like,
yeah, definitely. I mean, but I'm just talking. That's feeling like, you know, if only, imagine like only 70% have got a toilet. You know, like, we live in a world where everywhere should be able to have access to water, have a latrine or a toilet. Well, there's enough wealth in the world, isn't there? Let's face it. You know, it, like you just said, there.
Not about wealth.
But this is my whole point, isn't it? We need to come to a place where it's not about wealth, but clearly it is about wealth.
Well, it just seems like from the beginning of time there's been some greedy bugger, and he's had lots of kids.
But the thing is as well, like, I don't even think like Delhi's problem, that was the thing. I think Nehru, the guy who took over for after independence, really just didn't know what he was doing. And I think he latched on to
he was being in charge.
Yeah, but he didn't know what he was doing.
No, he didn't have any experience of running a country or anything, but he was being in charge, which is in charge of the money. And his family's been in charge of it ever since.
Yeah, but do you think they were... I don't know enough about him to say what his motivations were in it. But what it looked like to me is... No, but you can't just say that, because people have simultaneous motivations.
No,
he could have wanted to do good still, but he latched on to the wrong idea.
If he wanted to have an equitable system, he would have put one in place. He didn't. He wanted his daughter to be in power next, and she wanted her son to be in power next.
But that might just because you that disillusioned with your ideals.
I've never heard of them before, so I haven't got any ideas on it. I'm just seeing what was presented there.
No, but I mean, he could have been disillusioned by his ideals, and like he could have really thought, like, yo, this is the right way to go, like this communist movement. It's kind of even like in Cuba, and it like it's almost like, what's the saying? Like, you know, if you live long enough, you're always going to turn out to be the bad guy. That's the stage. So communism in a whole is meant to be a good thing, ain't it? Like, I think anyone who really goes to lead a country communist, I don't think they're thinking, oh, I want all the power. I think they think that it is the best way to have it, because it's meant to like negate from wealth and capitalism, and capitalism's bad, man, as well.
For
like,
the majority.
For the majority, yes, but somewhere along the way, I guess you do get corrupted. Yeah, exactly. And it gets corrupted, but then you're kind of away in the wind is the best way. So I'm just saying, I don't know if your man put his policies in place thinking, I want all the money, or he actually thought, you know what, this is the best way for the country.
I think he went with I want the money.
You think?
Yeah.
Nah, I think we need to dive into him.
Well,
you think? I don't think politicians go into politics for that reason, though.
Really?
I don't even think in England. I think it's the same as like school teachers or anything, like police. I think they go in there genuinely thinking, yo, I can help. And then they get disillusioned in the system. Yeah, I think the system messes them up.
I'm going to go with maybe in the old days, nurses used to want to help, but it was a profession. So it wasn't so much.
It was a vocation.
Right. And that's same with politicians and teachers. It's an acceptable out for a level of education.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? But can they help when they have experience of privilege? How do they really help? Yeah, they can talk to other privileged people and they all share something in common, but they don't come down to the normal man. The leaders tend to be, like I said, put in place in contrast to...
Yeah, but you know what the problem is, right? You say that, but it's like this, isn't it? I went to a party not that long ago with a bunch of, let's just say rich people. And I mean, when I say rich, I mean like upper class. No, you can have money and be rich, but these people come from wealth.
Old money.
Yeah, old money. And they were telling me about, I want to do this and I want to do that. Like, one was a doctor. These are young people as well, like 24. One's a doctor. One's like, wants to be like an MP. All come from wealth. Never struggled a day in their life, but they're telling me the plights of the working class people.
Oh, they're saying.
They're telling me. Okay. So basically, these people are Labour supporters, aren't it? So they're automatically just assuming I'm a Labour supporter for some reason. They're just like, da-da. And there's one like guy who supports Conservatives in there, and you should have seen how they backed him up in the kitchen, you know. Like, the Royal looked like they wanted to fight this guy just because he was a Conservative. And I was like, come in the kitchen. I was like, what's going on in there? And then it's like going, this guy doesn't believe in this and this. And I said, I was just like, what do you believe in it? Like, do you understand? So I said, what knowledge or experience do you have to be 24. Telling people? Well, one at 24, but one at 24 and just the life you've lived in it. You've always lived a life of privilege, so you can't talk on a man's plight because you've always come from a place of privilege. But that don't mean that you can't try and help. So this is my point, innit? This guy now who comes from privilege really thinks he's helping. So I don't think necessarily people do things just for money. I do think like people genuinely want to help, but whether they know or understand how to help in the best way, that's a different question. A lot of the time they don't, but it doesn't mean that they don't start out with the best intentions and then get, again, disillusioned by the system along the way. Now again, India's a massive place. India's like one of the BRIC cities, isn't it? So I hope by the time 2030 comes, they have sorted out them things. There are things they can do, like I said, if it's got one of the biggest solar panel or one of they're creating that many solar panels in India, use them there, innit? Like, get rid of the cars, use solar panels, like, get rid of the electric, stop burning up coal, stop poisoning the people.
it's setting itself to be a world leader in it. So it's got army, it's selling weapons now. So all the megas building cars, it owns iron industries. So in terms of a world superpower, it's trying to replicate the Chinese model. I would say in terms of a quick turnaround and getting into the top table.
Yeah.
It's possible. China's proved it, and the Indian government now, nuclear weapons, they're negotiating at the top table, whereas that's what it's about. So the journey has been, like I said, for them to deal with their size. Obviously is a mega thing, but become a world power.
Yes.
Respected, a world leader, have a voice at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And how they actually achieved that. Communism and what they call democracy, like I said, what are they? It's just some words that people use to describe what other people seem to be happy with. But the reality is money goes up, it don't come down. And societies, have to learn how to operate. So when the Chinese mastered city living, then they became good at it. Before, there was all rural. So the first cities were crap.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know how to put a city together. But once they got it down, it came, and that will be India. They'll get rid of the slum housing, have all sorts of things. But will India change? New houses, new roads, better access. Will India change?
I think it'll change. I don't know if it's going to change like by 2030 though. Right, okay, so that was Delhi, India's mega city. Capital of 1 billion people in India, so that's crazy in itself. Yeah, man. Anything else to add, Pops?
Wasn't 1 billion.
I said in India itself.
Oh, India,
yeah. 31 million in Delhi. Yeah, so
interesting. I like it. Like I said, I like to see that it's developing, to be honest. The only thing is, my whole thing is it going to be like all cities around the world are going to look exactly the same soon? You're going to go there, same building techniques, same, the old uniqueness of places may be lost in that. Obviously, the population is going to be predominantly Indian, but the English-speaking Indians in Delhi.
Yeah. That only matters if you go places, though. You understand? Like, obviously, you want it to keep its heritage and its richness. But England's like that. You go England, it's just the same everywhere. Dead, not even no nice buildings, ugly. Like, yeah. We out. Peace.